Some of you in your head might remember that old Grateful Dead song, but I don't know that this sermon's anything quite like that, but it is about some strange roads and some travel, to be sure. Over the last several weeks, we have found ourselves in the temple with Jesus, that last week of his life, and he is preaching justice. He is laying out his concerns for the community at hand, and he's challenging those who have much, and he's doing this sort of thing. We've been kind of hearing these lessons week in, week out. And I thought today it might be useful to, one, remember, we always confess that Jesus is fully God and fully man. That means fully God, fully man. And so as a man, inspired by God and fully God, as a man, Jesus was influenced, certainly, by the prophets. And it is the prophets that fed him uniquely, particularly for this last week of ministry in Jerusalem at the temple. And so I thought it might be useful today, since we've been in the temple for so long, to go back hundreds and hundreds of years to a prophet that is featured today in the Old Testament lesson. His name is Amos. And Amos is known to be the very first prophet to actually write the lesson out as we largely sort of see it today. Now, Amos existed about 800 years before Jesus. And he lived, and of course, Palestine, if we look at Palestine in Jesus' time, it changes as we go back in time. And when Amos was alive, Palestine was sort of two major kingdoms, and there were other kingdoms around it, but two major ones. The southern kingdom, of which Amos lived in, was called Judah. And within Judah, Jerusalem was there, Bethlehem was there. Amos lived a little bit south of Bethlehem, I believe. And then the northern kingdom was called Israel. And if we think about Palestine in Jesus' time, it largely it was Samaria and Galilee. Pretty much that was it, but with other kingdoms kind of coming in. But anyway, so Amos, he's not a prophet by trade or a holy man by any stretch of the imagination. He's very educated, but he is what we might call today an agro-capitalist. He brokers in sycamore nuts, figs, sheep. He's a shepherd. He's pretty well off, and he is quite a businessman, near as we can understand. But Amos, in the midst of his life, has a calling of sorts from God. And Amos is directed by God to leave his home country for a little while, to leave Judah and to go up into Israel and to preach in the power of justice, to help the people recognize that they have fallen short of shalom. And so Amos accepts the call, and he travels 30 or 40 miles into Israel. Pretty good long distance. Keep in mind, too, people from Judah, they dressed different. They sounded different than people from Israel. So Amos was really kind of an outsider. I mean, he had a different look, different appearance, different speech, would be viewed as very, very different. But here comes Amos into Israel, recognizing that God is angry with the people of faith because their prayers mean nothing when they treat others poorly. So Amos, first of all, a very political kind of guy. He first starts knocking all the kingdoms around Israel, saying that they have treated the people poorly. They have oppressed so many people in their midst, and the people in Israel, they're clapping and they're all excited and this, on and on. But then Amos says, but guess what? You're the worst. And he says, I don't know what you people are thinking, but if you think God fell off of a turnip truck, you're wrong. You see, God recognizes and despises your prayers and your songs and your gifts and your tithes and all this rigmarole when you then leave that space of prayer, go out into the world and treat your people unfairly. When you oppress others, when you don't work together to find a way to lift all people up. God did not give you that abundance, one, to hoard it or to lord it over others. And so you have a recipe for disaster. This will not be a sustainable way of life. And the hope of God is that you will open your eyes and your ears and your hearts and your mind to the recognition that everything in Israel is of value and is sacred. It's your call. I recognize these are very good times. You don't have anybody really oppressing you as a country, but those times are limited. You cannot continue to live this way and weaken your society by this oppression and expect it to stand over time. United, we stand. Divided, you will fall. And you, my friends, are divided. Well, certainly over time they lost power, and as they were wont to do. But I guess, and this is a great influence of Jesus. I mean, he is fed by these prophets. He refers to them regularly, not so much by name, but he does refer to the prophets. When he comes into the temple and he preaches shalom and he preaches justice. And so I guess where we stand today in 2020, in the midst of our lives, in the midst of everything that's going on around us, we have an opportunity, first of all, to ask ourselves, where do we stand in this story? To what extent are we Amos? To what extent do we feel God's call to recognize that there are others in this world who may not have it as well as we do for any number of reasons, but there are others in this world who truly are suffering from oppression? And certainly this is in our prayers. Or to what extent are we like those who are on the sidelines listening to Amos, saying he might have a point, but I'm not comfortable with any kind of other change. I'm living my life the best way I know how to live it, and I don't really like this character from down south coming up and kind of telling us what to do. Well, I don't know, if we're honest with ourselves, I suspect we have sometimes been a little bit Amos, and sometimes we've been a little bit like others in the crowd. I think, we have challenges in this world. And we are uniquely gifted, I suspect. Most of us here in the St. John community, that we have, one, enough to eat, we have clothing and shelter and these types, and a measure of luxury. And so we have probably plenty, and we're comfortable, and we hear about this other stuff and we don't know what to do, or we push it aside. But you see, the gospel calls us to continue to recognize that we must be God's hands and feet in the world. And so we bring these issues up. As a matter of fact, as a called and ordained preacher or teacher or minister in the Church of God, I am expected to preach on this type of material with some degree of regularity, not all the time. But it's important to our church that we start to look more clearly at the world around us. Now, I will tell you, that's not easy. Even on a micro level, it's so not always easy. I want to be comfortable. Are you kidding? I want to feel safe and secure and organized and in control. And I remember, in a very simple kind of way, I remember 4 years ago, I was going to visit a member of our congregation who was in the hospital, Genesis Hospital in Grand Blanc. And it was a Saturday morning, and then I had it scheduled where I'd go visit this member of the church, and then I would come back to a meeting at church in Fenton that Saturday morning. And so as I'm driving to the hospital, it came upon me to start to pray, and my prayer was, God, will you give me more opportunities to share your peace with others? I felt like it was kind of an inspired prayer. I'm just driving, just doing it. So anyway, so I get to Genesis. I go visit the parishioner. We had a good visit by all standards. Seemed to be a good call. I look at my watch, still have plenty of time to get to the church for the meeting. And I go and I head outstairs and I go outside, and my eyes meet a woman who is clearly in pain. And so I stopped, and I had my collar on, and I said, are you okay? And she says, well, my sister's dying, and we don't have anybody. And I said, would you like me to pray for you now? And she said, that'd be wonderful. So we prayed, and she thanked me for the prayer. And then I left to get in my car to go to the meeting. But as I got in my car to go to the meeting, I realized that I squandered an opportunity. Because if I were willing to let the spirit of peace, the spirit of shalom, the spirit of justice, mercy, and forgiveness to really flow through me, it would have been natural for me to say to her, would you like me to come back with you into the hospital and pray with you and her sister? I didn't do it. She would have said yes. I mean, it's slam dunk. Are you kidding? But I couldn't do it. You see, I just didn't have enough time. I was too focused on keeping everything organized and in order. Well, yeah, it happens. And I felt bad about it. Yes, I should have. I know God's forgiven me, and now it's a story of truth, but nevertheless, it demonstrates the fact that it's not always so easy to enter into this holy space and to see the opportunities that are before us and to fulfill prayers that have been answered. Because even an answered prayer requires a response from us. So with that said, we know what Jesus has said. We know what Amos has said. We know what all the prophets have said. Here we are with an opportunity to open our hearts and our minds and our imaginations, to look at the world around us, to hopefully clearly feel that pain for others that I pray every Sunday at the blessing, that yes, there's something I have seen in my life that brings me to tears. There are injustices, and I will not deny it. And when I get to that space, I have the opportunity to ask God, what would you have me do? And may we, when we ask God, respond to the answer. And so we continue to move forward. It's a challenging time, but also time filled with opportunity. And I pray that God's blessing of peace will be uniquely with you in the days ahead. Amen.